A sharp bark cut through the hum of the evening rush, drawing Anna's attention to the small, wiry dog shivering by the cafe's back door. It wasn't the first time she'd seen him. His matted fur and pleading eyes were becoming a regular sight. As the cafe's youngest waitress, Anna already had her hands full juggling orders and dodging her boss's glare, but something about the dog's desperation made her pause. "Anna, table 4 is waiting," her manager, Mr. Grayson, snapped, his voice slicing through the warm hum of the cafe. "I'll be right there," she called back, her eyes fixed on the dog. Its thin frame trembled in the biting wind, and her heart clenched. She couldn't ignore him any longer. Grabbing a leftover sandwich from the break room, she slipped out the back door, kneeling to offer the food. The dog hesitated, then darted forward, devouring the scraps in seconds. "Poor thing," she whispered, running her fingers gently over his bony back. She didn't notice Mr. Grayson's heavy footsteps until they stopped behind her. "Anna, what do you think you're doing?" She jumped to her feet, the dog retreating into the shadows. He looked hungry. This is a business, not a charity." Mr. Grayson's face was red with anger. "If you have time to feed strays, you have time to clear tables. Get back inside." Anna's cheeks burned as she hurried back, leaving the dog behind. She couldn't shake the image of his mournful eyes. The night wore on, but the incident nagged at her. When the cafe finally emptied, she found herself slipping out the back door again, hoping the dog was still there. This time she brought an entire meal. As she knelt, she heard the faint jingle of a collar beneath the dog's matted fur. "You have an owner?" she murmured, examining it more closely. The name tag was scratched and hard to read, but one thing was clear. It wasn't just any stray. A low growl made her freeze. She turned slowly, her eyes widening as two figures emerged from the shadows. "You've got something that belongs to us," one of them said, his voice menacing. Anna's heart raced as she clutched the dog protectively. "What do you want?" "The dog," the other man said, stepping closer. Something told her giving him up wasn't an option. Anna didn't wait for an explanation. Instinct kicked in and she bolted toward the alley, clutching the trembling dog. "Hey, stop her!" one of the men shouted, their heavy footsteps pounding behind her. The narrow alley twisted and turned, barely lit by a flickering street lamp. Anna's heart hammered as she ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The dog whimpered in her arms, its bony frame surprisingly light. "Hold on," she whispered, glancing back. The men were gaining, their shadows stretching long against the brick walls. She ducked into a side street, nearly tripping over a pile of crates. Her mind raced. Why were they after the dog? And what was so important about him? "Get back here," one of the men barked, his voice echoing like a threat. Anna spotted a chain-link fence ahead, its top lined with jagged barbs. There was no way over it. Desperation clawed at her chest as she scanned for an escape route. Her eyes landed on an open door to an old warehouse. Without hesitation, she darted inside, her sneakers skidding on the dusty floor. The faint sound of dripping water and the distant hum of machinery filled the cavernous space. She ducked behind a stack of pallets, her breath catching in her throat. The dog squirmed, licking her fingers nervously. "Shoo," she murmured, stroking his head. "We'll figure this out." The men entered moments later, their footsteps echoing ominously. She went in here. "Spread out." Anna pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her heart pounding. One of the men passed so close she could hear the crunch of his boots on broken glass. "Where'd she go?" The second man growled, frustration creeping into his tone. Anna's mind raced. She had to act fast. Her gaze fell on a rusty pipe lying nearby. Gripping it tightly, she waited for her chance. The first man rounded the corner of her hiding spot, his flashlight beam sweeping the area. As soon as it landed on her, she swung. The pipe connected with a dull thud, and the man crumpled to the ground. "Over here," the second man shouted, running toward her. Anna didn't wait. She sprinted for the far end of the warehouse, dodging debris and broken machinery. The dog barked sharply, its noise echoing through the space. "Quiet," she hissed, skidding around a corner. A ladder leading to the roof caught her eye. Without thinking, she scrambled up, the dog tucked securely under one arm. Below, the second man cursed loudly, his footsteps closing in. Reaching the roof, Anna gasped at the sight of the city sprawling below her. She didn't have time to admire the view. The man was climbing after her. "You're not getting away," he growled, his hand reaching for the top rung. Anna spotted a loose vent cover and yanked it free. As the man's head appeared, she slammed it down, knocking him off balance. He fell back with a shout, crashing to the ground below. Breathing heavily, Anna looked at the dog, who stared back with wide, trusting eyes. "Okay," she said, more to herself than him. "Now what?" The distant wail of sirens reached her ears. Relief washed over her. Someone must have reported the commotion. But then her heart sank. She wasn't sure if those sirens were coming to help her or the men she'd just escaped. She couldn't stay there. Hugging the dog closer, she climbed down the other side of the building and disappeared into the night. Whatever was going on, she needed answers, and fast. Anna slipped into the shadows of a deserted park, her legs trembling from the chase. She crouched behind a thick cluster of bushes, catching her breath as the dog licked her face. "What's your story, huh?" she whispered, running her fingers over the scratched name tag again. This time she could just make out the faint engraving, Maxwell. "Maxwell," she said softly. The dog's ears perked up at his name, and he let out a faint whine. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she found a text from her best friend, Lisa. "Where are you? Grayson's furious. Call me." Anna ignored it. Getting fired was the least of her worries. Her thoughts raced. Those men clearly wanted Maxwell, but why? And why had she felt so strongly about protecting him? The sound of footsteps made her freeze. She peeked through the bushes and saw a patrol car cruising slowly down the street. The men were nowhere in sight, but she didn't trust the cops to sort this out. She needed answers first. "Come on, boy," she whispered, easing out of her hiding spot. Maxwell followed obediently, his tail wagging faintly. She headed to the one place she thought might have answers. Lisa's older brother, Jake, who worked at an animal rescue center. He might know what to do. The center was dark when she arrived, and the windows shuttered. Anna knocked on the side door, praying Jake was still there. After a tense moment, the door creaked open and Jake's tired face appeared. "Anna? What the hell are you doing here?" "I need your help," she said quickly, pushing inside. "It's about this dog." Jake's gaze dropped to Maxwell, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Where'd you find him?" Anna explained everything. The stray dog, the men chasing her, and the strange feeling that Maxwell was more than he seemed. Jake listened intently, his brow furrowed. When she finished, he knelt beside Maxwell, carefully inspecting the collar. "This tag, it's military grade," he muttered. "What does that mean?" Anna asked, her heart pounding. Jake looked up, his face grim. "It means this dog isn't just a stray. He's part of a government program. A lot of military dogs have tracking implants, but this tag, it's custom. Whoever owned him didn't want him traced." Anna's stomach dropped. "So those men? They probably aren't the owners," Jake said. "But they knew what he was worth." A loud thud outside made them both jump. "Stay here," Jake ordered, grabbing a flashlight. Anna pulled Maxwell close as Jake stepped outside. The moment the door shut, Maxwell let out a low growl. The dog's body tensed, his ears flat against his head. The door burst open again and Jake stumbled back inside, his face pale. "They're here." Before Anna could react, the men from before appeared, their silhouettes darkening the doorway. "Hand over the dog," one of them said, his voice cold and steady. Jake stepped in front of Anna. "You're not getting him," he said firmly. The man smirked, pulling out a weapon. "I wasn't asking." Anna's breath caught as the gleam of the weapon reflected in the dim light. Maxwell growled low in his throat, positioning himself between her and the intruders. "Take the dog and leave." Jake barked, his voice steady despite the tension. The man with the weapon stepped forward, his cold eyes narrowing. "You've got no idea what you're dealing with. That dog is worth more than you can imagine." Jake didn't budge. "You think I care about money? You're not taking him." The second man moved swiftly, grabbing Jake by the collar and shoving him against the wall. Anna screamed, clutching Maxwell tighter. "Enough games," the man growled. "Give us the dog or—" He didn't get to finish. Maxwell lunged forward, his jaws clamping down on the man's arm. The attacker howled in pain, dropping his weapon. "Run, Anna!" Jake shouted, shoving the second man back as Maxwell released his grip. Anna hesitated for a split second, but Jake's desperate gaze gave her no choice. She bolted for the back exit, Maxwell at her heels. The alley behind the rescue center was narrow and filled with debris. Anna's heart pounded as she sprinted, the sound of shouting and scuffling echoing behind her. She knew Jake couldn't hold them off forever. "This way," she called to Maxwell, weaving through the maze of alleys. Suddenly, a black SUV screeched to a halt in front of her, cutting off her escape. The doors flew open and two more men jumped out. "You've got to be kidding me," Anna muttered, her chest tightening. She turned to run, but Maxwell froze, his ears twitching. A low growl rumbled from his throat, and he positioned himself between her and the approaching men. One of them raised a tranquilizer gun, aiming it directly at Maxwell. "No!" Anna shouted, grabbing a broken piece of wood from the ground. She swung wildly, knocking the weapon from his hands. The second man lunged for her, but Maxwell was faster. The dog leaped, his powerful jaws sinking into the man's leg. The attacker screamed, falling to the ground. Anna didn't wait to see what happened next. She grabbed Maxwell's collar and ran, her mind racing. They needed to disappear fast. She spotted a storm drain up ahead, the metal grate slightly ajar. "In here," she whispered, lifting the grate with trembling hands. Maxwell hesitated, sniffing the dark opening, but Anna tugged him forward. The drain was damp and smelled of mildew, but it was their best chance at hiding. She pulled the grate back into place just as the sound of footsteps grew louder. Spread out. They couldn't have gone far. Anna held her breath, her back pressed against the cold, wet wall. Maxwell sat quietly beside her, his body tense but still. Minutes felt like hours as the men searched above them. Finally, the footsteps faded, and silence settled over the drain. Anna exhaled shakily, her hands trembling. "What is happening, Maxwell?" she whispered, stroking his fur. The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes full of trust. For the first time, Anna noticed a faint scar running along his side, a surgical incision. "What did they do to you?" she murmured, her voice breaking. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, startling her. She pulled it out and saw a single text from an unknown number. "You're in danger. Meet me at Pier 17. Midnight. Bring the dog." Anna stared at the message, her mind spinning. Who was this? And how did they know about Maxwell? The dog nudged her hand, his warm eyes encouraging her. She swallowed hard. Whatever was going on, she had no choice but to see it through. The pier loomed ahead, its weathered wooden planks creaking under Anna's cautious steps. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting an eerie glow over the scene. Maxwell trotted beside her, his steps purposeful as if he knew this place. "Stay close," Anna whispered, scanning the shadows for movement. A figure emerged from the darkness, a tall woman in a black trench coat, her sharp features illuminated by the faint light of a nearby lamppost. "You made it," the woman said, her voice low but firm. "I wasn't sure you would." "Who are you?" Anna demanded, pulling Maxwell closer. "And why is everyone after him?" The woman stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "My name is Agent Collins. I work with a covert branch of the military. Maxwell isn't just a dog. He's part of a top-secret program called Project Sentinel." Anna's heart raced. "What kind of program?" Collins knelt, meeting Maxwell's gaze. Maxwell and others like him were trained to detect and neutralize threats, bombs, chemicals, even human targets. But Maxwell is special. He was given an experimental neural enhancement, making him smarter and more intuitive than any other dog we've ever seen. Anna glanced down at Maxwell, her chest tightening. "So he's a weapon?" Collins shook her head. "Not anymore. He went rogue during a mission and the program was shut down. The men chasing you are mercenaries hired by a private contractor. They want to exploit him for their own purposes. Why didn't you stop them?" Anna asked, her voice sharp. Collins sighed. "We've been trying, but they're well-funded and ruthless. Maxwell was off the grid until you found him. Now they know where he is, and they won't stop until they have him." Anna clenched her fists. "So what happens now? You take him back to some lab?" "No," Collins said firmly. "He's earned his freedom. But keeping him safe means disappearing, completely." Anna's throat tightened. "Disappearing? You mean I can't?" A sudden crash interrupted her. The mercenaries had found them. "Get down!" Collins shouted, drawing a concealed weapon. The pier erupted into chaos. Shots rang out, splintering the wooden planks. Maxwell barked furiously, darting between the shadows to confuse the attackers. Anna scrambled for cover, her heart pounding. She spotted one of the mercenaries advancing on Collins and grabbed a loose piece of timber from the ground. With a surge of adrenaline, she swung it, knocking the man off balance. "Nice move," Collins called, firing at another attacker. Maxwell lunged at the last mercenary, his enhanced reflexes outmatching the man's clumsy movements. The mercenary screamed as Maxwell pinned him to the ground, his sharp bark echoing across the pier. Within minutes it was over. The mercenaries lay subdued, their weapons scattered. Collins approached Anna, her expression grim but impressed. "You've got guts, kid." Anna knelt beside Maxwell, running her hands through his fur. "So what happens to him now?" Collins hesitated. "I can protect him, but he'll need to stay hidden. It's not safe for him, or you, if you stay together? Tears blurred Anna's vision. He's not just a dog. He's my friend. Maxwell nudged her hand, his eyes full of understanding. I know, Collins said softly. But this is the only way. Anna hugged Maxwell tightly, her heart breaking. Be safe, okay? Don't forget me. The dog licked her face, his tail wagging faintly. Then he turned and followed Collins into the shadows, disappearing from view. Anna stood on the pier long after they were gone, the waves lapping against the shore. She had lost her job, faced danger she couldn't have imagined, and said goodbye to a friend she'd never forget. But as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, she knew one thing for certain. She'd done the right thing.